Happy New Year. Switzerland, a country known for many things, like their lovely nature, being a paradise for rich people, mostly, cheese, not having a real official language, not too dissimilar to another certain country, and of course for refusing to participate in any kind of war, simply because they don't have to, as the Alps basically turns their entire country into a flipping fortress. Despite this, Switzerland has always had a very active military industry. And today we'll talk about every ground vehicle we could possibly get in the upcoming Switzerland sub-tree. Damn. Let's first go over the extended military history of Switzerland. So, in World War II, they shot down a handful of German aircraft, some of their civilians got fucking bombed, and they contributed a bit in the war in Afghanistan, and that's it. That's it. They just don't do war, I guess. Because of this, a large part of their military industry is focused at the export market. Switzerland also has this habit of creating a million different vehicle prototypes and adopting exactly none of them. As for how ground forces will be added to the game, it's obviously gotta be a sub-tree for Germany, same as the air tree. I think Switzerland being a sub-tree is okay. They have a good amount of unique stuff though, and they could actually pretty easily make a separate Swiss tech tree, as proven by this full Swiss tree made by Kate, for instance, which was a huge help in making this video. Kate has a dedicated Switzerland Discord server where there were again a lot of helpful people. My personal helper and fact checker this time around was ELT39 from my server, and in general some people from my server. There will be a link to both mine and Kate's servers in the description. Last shout out I want to give to the X-Venation man, who we have decided to collab a bit with. In contrast to me, he creates more short form content, but it's pretty damn good. And he's planning to work on more educational stuff as well. Also, he'll give me a shout out as well, and he gets a lot more views than I do. So there are links to his channel as well as his server where you can help him with research as well. In game, we actually have surprisingly little for Switzerland as of now, apart from the air sub-tree, including one whole unique vehicle, which they wanted to make a premium, by the way. Apart from the regular Air Force roundel and flag, we have a more modern Air Force patch and a patch for the 11th Air Squadron, and that's it. Let's quickly go back to Czechoslovakia, as Pattern managed to dig up quite a bit more stuff to cover. If you don't care about Czechoslovakia, which I don't blame you for, you can skip ahead to the Swiss stuff here. There are a couple more captured vehicles Czechoslovakia used. They captured AMD 35s, which were used during the Prague Uprising, and they captured some more German equipment like the Sturmhaubitze 42, SD-KFZ 222, and SD-KFZ 7-2. There are a number of improvised vehicles, like the Skoda 6L 6x6, armed with a 15mm ZB60 machine gun. The Skoda 256 is a civilian car, some of which were modified with improvised add-on armor, and German MG 151-20 triple 20mm machine gun systems. These are the same guns the SPAA in the Soviet less effort more money pack has. The same machine guns were also bolted to the SD-KFZ4, the same body the 15cm rocket boy has in game. You know, objectively the worst vehicle in the entire War Thunder cinematic multiverse. There are some other trucks, like the ZIS-42 and Gas MM, both armed with Dishkas. There's another modification of the S21C prototype, also known as the T21, armed with a different gun, though it's uncertain exactly what gun it has. There are some more prototypes of the OT-810D, like this one with the same recoilless rifle, just placed a bit more fuckily. The Yukol Bezot is another prototype, again placing the recoilless rifle quite fuckily, but it offers a good bit more protection. A recoilless rifle was also placed on the Gas 69 4x4, though not much info exists on this thing apart from this one picture. Czechoslovakia tested the 2P26 Schmel, an ATGM armed 4x4 from Poland. It was never adopted. Next up, a very interesting vehicle, a testbed for the VZ77 Dana, a Tatra 813 armed with the ML20 152mm howitzer, pretty much the same exact one the ISU 152 uses. It looks just so clunky, which is exactly my style. The ZIL 131B and 13NM is basically just a Katyusha with a slightly more modern body. The Samoda is quite an interesting vehicle. It's a Tatra 138 6x6 armed with 4 30mm as well as a solid radar. So it's a perfect like 6.7 SPAA. There's a slightly earlier version of the Pander 8x8 Evo, it just loses the active protection system. The LOV 4x4 CZ2 ZST 2020 SF RPG7 is just on 4x4 with a couple of dudes in the back with RPG7s. Not sure if this really counts, but I really don't see why not, to be honest. They are trained specifically to fire on the move, so, you know, get to it, Gaijin. Lastly, Slovakia has decided on their new MBT, which is the CV90-120. Awesome. I am sure it will hold up great. Slovakia already fully developed and built the autoloader for it, so, you know, get to it, Gaijin. Alright, so I'm adding an extra bit here because in the time it took for me to edit the video, Pattern has found a couple more vehicles. There's the Mosh 2, an amphibious 4x4 armed with a Tchaikovsky. There's an OT-810 with a ring-mounted 81mm recoilless gun. The OT-64 got a recoilless gun, again placed very, very fuckily though. And the Land Rover Defender got an SPG-9 recoilless gun as well, but this time on an actual mount. Normally I'd also mention any corrections here, but to my pleasant surprise there really weren't any major mistakes to correct. So huge props to Pattern and War Thunder Czechoslovakia for fact-checking. The only thing Pattern brought up is that the T-72EA also gets a stronger engine. Also, welcome back BMP1, we missed you. Anyway, moving to Switzerland, starting with proper tanks, the codes of War Thunder. And for this video, definitely the least confusing part. I first want to get a handful of copy-paste vehicles out of the way, as there are a number of vehicles from other countries that Switzerland trialed but never adopted. This includes the Ram 2, the M4A for Sherman, the M47 Patton, and even the M1 Abrams. This would be the box M1. They tested a funny amount of American vehicles, only to not adopt any of them. They also tested the L60, a Swedish light tank very similar to existing tier 1 tanks in game, but with an even rounder turret and armed with a 20mm autocannon. During Germany's invasion of France, a lot of French people evacuated to Switzerland, being neighbors and all that. A lot of French soldiers did as well, taking with them at least one R35, which was taken and put into service in the Swiss army. This one is the same as the R35 in game, just with the endlessly shitty short 37mm, and was renamed to Leichte Panzer 35. The first tank in proper service comes from Czechoslovakia, in the form of the Panzerwagen 39, with a whopping 24 in service, 12 of which were imported from Czechoslovakia, with the other half produced domestically. This is pretty much just a lighter version of the Panzer 38, which I already wouldn't really call a heavy breakthrough tank. The Panzer 39 gets 32mm of armor at most, and is armed with a 20mm quick-firing Oerlikon gun, with around 30mm of penetration with APHE, and about 45mm of pen with solid shot. The imported ones came with a 119 horsepower engine, and the produced ones with a domestic 110 horsepower one. With the 20mm being a pathetic excuse for a tank gun, and the Swiss knowing it, they made a prototype upgunning one of the Panzer 39s with a Pak 41 47mm, now achieving a more respectable 70 to 80mm of penetration. Due to Switzerland being one of the only countries not participating in the Second World War, this is it for World War II stuff when it comes to actual tanks. Things ramped up after the war though, because who cares about the blood-hungry world superpower literally right next to you? The far scarier threat is on the other side of Europe. Communism. Okay, I said ramped up, but we're still on vehicles from other countries. Switzerland's first post-war tank was the AMX 13, renamed to Panzer 51. Shortly after, they followed half of Europe and ordered Centurions. They had Mark IIIs and Mark Vs, named Panzer 55, and Mark 7s, named Panzer 57, which is virtually identical to the previous Marks. Mark 7s were upgraded in 1960 to the Panzer 55-60, because they were upgraded in 1960. This is a recurring theme with these names. This upgrade saw the 84mm replaced with the much more reliable L7 105mm gun. Shortly before this, Switzerland was actually already working on a domestic design, and this is where things get interesting. Starting with the first prototype, the KW30-57-1. A full Swiss original design with both a cast hull and turret, with mediocre armor, average mobility, smoke grenades, and an old 90mm gun with around 220mm of penetration. Starting strong. One cool feature it did have was a coaxial 20mm. The second prototype, the KW30-57-2, made some very minor changes to the design, like removing the side skirts, adding a new cupola and roof machine gun, and other very minor improvements like some spare tracks on the hull front. The Panzer 58 would be the production variant of the second prototype, with 10 being made, with a handful receiving the 84 from the Centurion instead of the 90mm. All 10 of these vehicles, not having done anything, were later rearmed with the L7-105 as well, and renamed to Panzer 61. These are the pre-production variant of the Panzer 61 though, and the newly produced Panzer 61 saw a number of upgrades over the retrofitted ones, like an improved engine, slightly better armor, and a French electric turret drive. The Panzer 61 saw a number of variants, ranging from AA1 through AA9, though AA1 through AA8 saw no changes you would notice in-game at all. The A9 variant though replaced the 20mm with a 7.62mm machine gun as it could carry more ammo. But the ammo stowage and fire control system were updated to allow the use of APFSDS shells. A single earlier Panzer 61 was also equipped with the French SAMM fire control system, giving it a 2-plane stabilizer. However, considering even the French appeared to not want to use the stabilizer, the Swiss kindly declined and opted to use their own stabilization system instead, on the Panzer 68, evolving the Panzer 61 even further, also upgrading the engine, giving it more power, and adding a new transmission, giving it the same 53 km/h speed in both forwards and backwards. Next up is the Panzer 68-75, also known as the Panzer 68 GT, meaning grosser Turm, or bigger turret. It gets a bigger turret, I don't know what else to tell you. The Panzer 68-88 gets a new fire control system, now with a laser rangefinder, as well as better engine filters for more performance. This is where the production run of this vehicle series ends, but a couple of prototypes were made. The Kampfwertsteigerung modernization project was an attempt to modernize the Panzer 68-88 further, to no avail. We don't know much about this thing sadly, apart from it having add-on armor. It is rumored to be similar to British Chobham armor, but it might as well consist of fucking Rusty for all we know. This same vehicle was also tested with a domestic 120mm gun, replacing the old L7. A dope looking tank, and I really hope more information on it will surface eventually. Another prototype is the Panzer 68 ET, unofficially known as the Panzer 2000. Most notable on this thing is the add-on spaced armor, though it's likely very thin, but it also gets a laser rangefinder and a new compact 120mm gun. But, best of all, the thing still exists. Instead of further modernization of their domestic designs, Switzerland instead opted for, again, purchasing vehicles from other countries. Beating the M1 Abrams, Switzerland chose the Leopard 2A4, renamed to Panzer 87. Go ahead and find a seat, sir, there is plenty of space. This thing is not entirely copy-paste though, as there are some very handy upgrades. The Panzer 87 gets domestic machine guns, but it also gets an engine sound suppressor, which would actually be super useful in game, as well as a better APFSDS shell, reportedly giving around 480mm of penetration. So it's DM33 pretty much. Next vehicle is one that really makes me happy though. Just really fills me with hope. Really makes my day brighter and bountiful. Introducing the Panzer 87-140. The base Panzer 87 armed with a domestically designed compact 140mm gun that fires a meter-long APFSDS dart. There are claims that this thing can pen up to 1000mm of armor, but it's likely closer to 800mm. But, I mean, that's still 100mm of penetration more than the current strongest APFSDS shell on the 292, so it'll be effective, no questions asked. The same 140 was tested on a Panzer 68, but it can't carry any ammo, nor crew for that matter, so this one stays in a museum, I'm afraid. The Leopard 2A4 of course also eventually became outdated. Don't let this fact stop you from blaming the poor design of the vehicle for the losses in Ukraine though. Switzerland's answer to this were two separate prototypes. First one is the Panzer 87WE, which received better thermals, electric turret reverse, a small RCWS, and most notably the add-on armor, which apparently is stronger than that of the Leopard 2A5. This prototype can also be equipped with Barracuda camo netting, or at least that's what the liberal left wants you to believe. According to RUAG, you are actually completely delusional for thinking this, as according to them, this is a completely separate prototype, despite being visually identical to the previous vehicle. The other prototype is known as the Panzer 87 MLU, overall being a far less substantial upgrade, only receiving a new fire control system and more add-on armor, though this time also on the front hull. The first prototype was favored, though still shaven down quite a bit. The production Panzer 87 WE looks visually very similar to the regular 87, but is still a pretty significant upgrade. It got the better thermals and electric turret drive from the prototype, but it loses both the RCWS and add-on armor, though it did receive an upgrade to its armor, with rumors of titanium being included. It also gets a better APFSDS shell once again, reportedly giving it around 620mm of penetration, so the M53 pretty much. This is the MBT the Swiss still use today, but they did experiment further on the previous prototypes. The first prototype was armed with a longer L55 gun at some point, but its performance over the existing L44 was not considered significant enough to warrant mass production. They also had another go at using the 40mm baby. Oh my goodness gracious. This prototype was constructed in the early 2000s and as far as we know still exists. It's basically just a combination of the first WE prototype and the 140mm prototype from earlier, though it loses the RCWS. A worthwhile sacrifice in my opinion. Last but not least, the MLU prototype saw an update, now aimed at the export market, specifically at Finland, who kindly told them to get lost so they could buy Leopard 2A6s from us, the Netherlands, instead. Huge win for us. Compared to the first prototype, it gets more add-on armor on the sides, with slat armor on the rear, as well as a CITV, an RCWS with a 50 cal, and laser warning receivers. Now that we're done with proper tanks, we can get to the boring stuff, i.e. the light tanks, and IFVs and armored cars and the sorts. Here you'll see that Switzerland did actually use a couple of American vehicles, like the T-17E1, renamed in Switzerland to Radpanzer M6. This is the same series as the Staghound AA in the British tree, just with a 37mm this time. A couple different weapons were tried on this thing. 5 M6s were rearmed with the same Pak 41 47mm the Panzer 39 was tested with, as well as a very fast-firing domestic 20mm. 2 prototypes were made on the HS-30 chassis, the same chassis as the German recoilless rifle boy. These are instead proper light tanks though, with a separate turret armed with a 90mm gun that fires heat FS as well as smoke grenades. The same exact turret was also placed on a Panzer 51, or AMX-13, renamed to Jagdpanzer Pirat. The Radpanzer Pak 55 has the same heat-slinging gun, though in a different turret. That of the Scorpion 2, which I'll get into later. Continuing with a lot of armored cars. The MR823, a domestic 4x4 with a slightly different turret as on the HS-30 light tank, though this one doesn't get the smoke grenades. Switzerland made several APC prototypes, like the Puma, not to be confused with the Puma or the Puma. It's a 6x6 armed with a 20mm and smoke grenades. The Shark is a larger 8x8, just like a real Shark, aimed at the export market. The base version gets a new turret armed with a 35mm Oerlikon, capable of firing APDS, and can go up to a very respectable 100 km/h. A couple different turrets from other nations were tried on the Shark. The FL-12 turret from the French AMX-13-105, which Gaijin just refuses to add for some reason. It's the same as the DF-105 pretty much. Another French turret is the FL-20, this time the same exact one as on the Clovis. Next, some help from Germany. The Shark LATS, or Light Armored Turret System, uses a Rheinmetall turret armed with a 105mm gun. This gun has pretty much the same characteristics as the L7-105, but it gets a 6-second 13-round autoloader. It also gets a laser rangefinder and thermals. The Shark LPTS-105 uses another Rheinmetall turret, and a very peculiar, almost mind-bogglingly retarded one at that. It uses the same 105 again, with autoloader, and could even be equipped with a roof MG. That's all for the Shark now, but there are a remarkable amount of anti-air variants made, which I'll get into later. First, we're gonna take a look at the Piranha series. Now, I thought the BMPs were bad with all their variants, but this. So the Piranha is another APC design aimed at the export market. They made it in various sizes, and it's amphibious, and no one really used it apart from the Canadians, despite making 5 gazillion variants and it being amphibious. We have a number of variants to go through, almost all of them just prototypes or demonstrators. So let's get started. Starting with the Piranha 2 6x6. Now, this entire process will be somewhat simplified by the fact that a decent portion uses very similar turrets. Specifically the same family of Oerlikon turrets that the Marder has. There are 2 of these on the Piranha 2 6x6, with the GBD A05 and GBD COA, both getting a 25mm and smoke grenades, slightly larger than the 20mm on the actual Martyr. There's a further variant with a Belgian 90mm cockerel turret. Alright, so I'm gonna have to re-record this bit, because it seems I was just saying things that I was completely pulling out of my own ass or something. If you couldn't tell, I'm more sick now, so I'm very, very in the mood for this. Firstly, there's another 6x6 variant with 20mm. I don't care. It's for the 8x8 with the Martyr-like turret. There are 2 different ones with 20mm guns. One of them has the machine gun thingamajig that the Martyr has. I also have a third one noted with a 20mm. I have no idea which one that is, where I got that one from. Now, originally I also said there was one with a 35mm, but it's not a Martyr-like turret, it's the GDD BOE turret with a 35mm, and I thought this was the same turret as a Shark, but it's not. But I also don't know what it in reality is, but it's... yeah. Moving on to other, more interesting turrets, like the Turkish FNSS sharpshooter turret, a one-man turret armed with a stabilized 25mm and smoke grenades. The Piranha 2 8x8 Delco you might actually recognize, as this is pretty much the LAV-25 the US and Canada uses. Being one of the very few cases the US military didn't spend $15 Brazilian to make a simple car or whatever. It also gets a 25mm, as well as smoke and thermals. One of the surprisingly few domestic turrets used, apart from the Martyr series, is the Oerlikon KCB turret. A fairly conventional 2-man design armed with a 30mm, and it also gets the Martyr machine gun doohickey. A couple French turrets were tested, like the Dragar 1-man turret, an older version of the one the VBCI uses in-game, though still armed with the same 25mm and smoke, as well as a laser rangefinder. The TS-90 turret, i.e. that of the Mars 15, was also tested, as well as another John Cockerill 90mm turret. Lastly, for the Panzer II, for now, the Panzer II 8x8 Ares, because America can't help but fuck with everything. This, if you couldn't tell, is a turret from the RDF-LT, a wheeled RDF-LT. This is one of the vehicles I most badly do not want added. Onto the Piranha 3. These got some more Cockerill turrets, specifically the 3030 MTS turret, armed with a 30mm, and the 3105 turret, armed with, you guessed it, a 105. The Piranha 3 also received the Delco turret, same as the LAV-25. The Piranha 3 10x10 school bus was equipped with the French TML-105 turret, similar to that of the AMX-10RC. Compared to the AMX-10, it gets a better APFSTS shell and can be seen both with and without the spaced armor. The Piranha 4 also received the LAV-25 turret, as well as a more modern version with a 25mm gun, and this same turret with a 30mm, as well as an RCWS. The Piranha 4 also received the same RCWS 30 turret the Namur has in-game, just without the missiles. The newest version is the Piranha 5. The base demonstrator has a 30mm Bushmaster, alongside everything you'd expect in a modern fire control system. The Javelin on the side is for infantry, by the way. No BTR-82AT gameplay for anyone else. The Piranha 5 was yet again equipped with a number of other turrets, like the Lance turret from Rheinmetall, again with a 30mm and a modern fire control system. For reference, the KF-41 uses the Lance 2 turret. This variant can also be equipped with World War II Soviet bed bases as spaced armor, for no in-game reason. The Samson Mark II turret was also used, once again very similar to that of the Vilkas. Another Cockerill turret was used as a demonstrator as well, another 3000 series armed with either a 30 or 40mm. Okay, that's everything on the Piranha for now. Let's get one more armored car out of the way, the Eagle 5. It gets an RCWS armed with a 50 cal and a Javelin missile. We are far from done with light tanks though, as there are a large number of tracked infantry fighting vehicles to go through. Here you'll also see a lot of similarities to the German Martyr. This is because the Martyr development included MOAC, so if you can't wait 2 years for the ground tree to be implemented, you can just play the Martyr one and you'll get pretty much the same experience. Firstly is the Sauer Tartaruga, based off of the Australian Sauer Schützenpanzer, but overall just being less modern. It's slightly larger and much uglier, whilst keeping the same 20mm. The prototype still exists today. The Typhoon is yet another new prototype, this time though on the actual Marder chassis. It gets a 20mm turrets, smoke, and another 2 Marder machine gun contraptions. MOAC tested a domestic turret on the German RU-362, another Marder chassis with another turret from the Marder family as well. MOAC actually refers to this thing as the Typhoon as well, despite it being remarkably unrelated apart from the Marder chassis. The Tornado is a more extensive prototype series, with the first prototype actually being intended for domestic use for once. It was rejected. It gets a crewless turret with a 20mm, but also quite uniquely 4 hidden Batam wire-guided missiles, each having about 500mm of penetration. It also gets 2 more Marder machine gun doodads. The Tornado 2 loses the Batam ATGMs and now has the actual Marder 1 turret, an earlier version though without the missiles. The Tornado Mark 1 slightly redesigns the chassis and hull shape. Thankfully it retains the Marder machine gun whatchamacallums, and has this awesome fucking picture with an aircraft. The Mark 1 was also tested with the Swedish GBD COA turret, armed with a 20mm and manual turret drive. Like, come on man, we've left the interwar period, step it up. The Tornado Mark II primarily just redesigns the front hull, again retaining the Marder machine gun apparatuses, still doing everything it can to become the Marder. This is a slightly more modern turret, getting a 25mm, smoke grenades and night vision. There was another variant armed with a 35mm. The Mark II was armed with the GBD Bob turret, looking like a Marder turret and Bradley turret were merged into some unholy abomination. It gets a 25mm and a 7.62 machine gun, and these are double tow launchers. The Tornado Mark II Milan also carries an ATGM, on top of a new turret, once again having a 20mm. The Mark II received the same 35mm turret from the Shark, as well as a new C-25 turret with a 20mm and smoke grenades. Now, once again, almost all of the previously mentioned vehicles were just prototypes. The Swiss army rejected all of these in favor of the M113, renamed in Switzerland to Schützenpanzer 6373. These are just M113A1s armed with the Swedish Haglunds turret, the same one as on the PBV 302 in-game, with the same less than stellar 20mm. These were modernized to the Schützenpanzer 6389, receiving some light add-on armor, smoke grenades and possibly a new power pack, but this is unconfirmed. The Marder-like GBD COA turret was also tested on the M113. This one gets a 20mm and smokes of course. The Mistral is another prototype IFV, now based on the M113, with the same Marder-like turret as the previous prototype. The last domestic IFV prototype series is the Trojan. Again, very Marder-like, made to replace the Schützenpanzer 6373, with a 25mm Marder-like turret with manual traverse again. No wonder it was rejected. This thing was also tested with the Kuka E4A1 turret, armed with a 30mm thermals laser rangefinder and finally a stabilizer. The SN25 was the last prototype, again using the Trojan body with a new 25mm turret, also getting larger side skirts. Another competitor was the Warrior 2000 from Britain, a modification of the Warrior IFV made specifically for Switzerland. It gets a new aluminium hull with added applique armor, with a more powerful engine to compensate, as well as a redesigned turret with a 30mm Bushmaster. Again, the Trojan was quite sensibly rejected in favor of the Schützenpanzer 2000. Also known as the CV90-30CH. These are simply imported CV90-30s Mark IIs, though they get a couple of changes. The engine and transmission are domestic designs, though not offering any real change in performance, admittedly. But the gun and fire control system are domestic as well, which is good, because Gaijin despises the Bushmaster even more than their community for some reason. Moving to tank destroyers and self-propelled guns now, and going back to World War II. As mentioned previously, the 20mm on the Panzer 39 sucks ass in anything other than anti-personnel. So the Swiss tested with converting the Panzer 39 into a tank destroyer, which is how we get to the famous Nahkampfkanone series. The first, Nahkampfkanone 1, pretty much is just an extendo Panzer 39 hull with a 75mm gun comparable to the German ones on a swivel. Soon after, the design team became sober again and actually added some protection. The Nahkampfkanone 1 Ausführung 2 simplified the whole superstructure and replaced the 75mm gun with a solid 105mm howitzer. The first Nahkampfkanone prototype actually still exists on display in Thun, and this is where I thought the story of the Nahkampfkanone 1 ended, until I stumbled across this very odd looking picture. I asked about it in Kate's Swiss Discord server, where he told me that this is the Nahkampfkanone 1 in disrepair in Thun. Now, I think this does absolutely add up looking at the thing, apart from the gun. Kate said it's just the regular 75mm but broken, but I believe there are a number of key differences with this gun compared to that of the regular Nahkampfkanone. The barrel here is a lot thicker compared to the recoil mechanism, and there also isn't a visible gap in between, like on the surviving prototype. The original prototype also has these attachment points on these parts that hold the gun in place, which are clearly not present in this picture, among other details. The photo only appears once on Google using reverse image search, and it comes from this website from one absolute legend who has been making and posting stuff for 20 years now. His post claims it's the Ausführung 2 variant, but both the gun and superstructure do not match. The casemate is clearly based on the first version. I tried reaching out to him and trying to find out where he found this picture, but I unfortunately didn't get a reply. The closest matching gun I could find is this 75mm howitzer, and even this I don't think is a full match. In general, it's quite hard to tell what's exactly going on due to the poor picture quality, as well as the entire gun assembly clearly being completely dislocated. And it is absolutely fully possible that Kate is completely right and it is just the regular 75mm but broken. Call me a schizophrenic all you want, but I think this could be worth looking into more. And if you have anything to add, I'd love to hear it. The last variant of the Nahkampfkanone series is the Nahkampfkanone 2, a completely new design constructed right after the war, having pretty much nothing in common with the previous prototypes. Having a completely new running gear, a full cast hull with up to 70mm of armor. It gets a slightly better 75mm gun, and the full prototype still exists today as well. Switzerland's main tank for a while was the G13. Adswords that were repaired and improved in Czechoslovakia, specifically for Switzerland. It gets the same gun as the Stug and was later improved with a domestic engine. One of these nightmarish vehicles was upgunned as well, now with a PaK 51 75mm gun. It could go through about 200mm of armor with APHE, but it also had access to APDS shells, now being able to go through 250mm of armor. Going into more wacky designs, the Rat Panzer. The joke writes itself. It's a domestic 4x4 that could go up to 80 km per hour. Armed with a French 75mm flak gun, capable of going through about 115mm of armor. The gun can traverse 360 degrees surprisingly enough, but you get no gun depression and barely any ammo, making this thing perfect for the balls to the walls kamikaze type playstyle. This thing was developed slightly further, getting more armor protection, more ammo capacity, the same 90mm heat-slinging Panzerabwehrkanone as the HS-30 again, all the while being lighter and faster somehow. The same 90mm gun was used some more on the Scorpion 1, a prototype for a light tank destroyer in a similar light to the M18. It was, yet again, rejected by the Swiss army. There was a Scorpion 2, but all it did was improve the gun a bit by giving it a higher velocity. The Cheetah is, well, it's a Swiss JPC-45. It gets comparable speed, comparable armor, and the same exact gun and gun mount. Though it does get the Marder machine gun gizmo. The Typhoon 2, same chassis as the Typhoon 1, was Switzerland's attempt to make a casemate main battle tank, which went about as well as you'd expect. It received a whole 50mm of front armor, 5 crew members, and an L7-105. Though not as ridiculously fast as the VT-12, it can still reach a very respectable 65 km per hour. Switzerland showed interest in the French AMX-61, a self-propelled howitzer built on the AMX-13 chassis, and one I'm quite surprised isn't in the game yet. France converted 4 of these into the AMX-62 for Switzerland, also known as the 10.5cm Selbstfahrhaubitze AMX-13, turning this casemate goober into a turreted goober. It retains the same 105mm howitzer capable of firing heat FS with 400mm of pen. The Panzerkanone 68 is an interesting one, being the only fully domestic proper artillery vehicle, sitting atop a modified Panzer 68 hull with an entirely new turret. It gets a roof MG, smoke, and a 155mm howitzer capable of firing the same ammunition as the M109. 4 of these were built, and 2 still exist today. Speaking of the M109 though, the Panzerhaubitze 66, imported M109s. These were the earliest version though, with the L23 short BP. These were later upgraded to the Panzerhaubitze 74, and later the Panzerhaubitze 79 and 88. These you could consider M109A1Bs, i.e. M109s upgraded to M109A1 standards, now with the longer L39 gun. This gun was actually lengthened again on the Panzerhaubitze K-West, a much more thorough upgrade, also receiving more space for ammo as well as a new gun laying system, allowing it to fire the first 3 rounds within 15 seconds at the blood cost of 2 crew members. The variant currently in service is the Panzerhaubitze K-West WE, though it sees no real upgrades you would notice in game. RUAG did more tests with their compact 120mm smoothbore gun, also placing it into an M109. Maybe. It is uncertain if this picture is real or doctored, but the gun was definitely made, so, you know, make it happen, Gaijin. With artillery out of the way, we have more Piranha variants to go through. Now starting with the Piranha 1. We have both a 4x4 and 6x6 variant, both armed with a simple tow missile. Very simple, very basic. I'm quite surprised we don't really have many wheeled ATGM vehicles in the game. Which is not a request, by the way, Gaijin. The 6x6 variant would be developed into the Panzerjäger 85 and was actually adopted by the Swiss army. It saw a relatively limited pre-production run of 59 vehicles, but was quickly upgraded to the Panzerjäger 90, which saw a much larger production run with over 300 vehicles made. It received an obvious new turret now with double tows, and is technically still in service, but it's in the process of being phased out at the moment. The Piranha 2 8x8 was tested with the Euro missile Mephisto system, the same exact system the Mephisto in-game uses, and there's a Piranha 3 6x6 with an elevated quadruple tow launcher with thermals as well. There are a handful more wacky looking ATGM carriers, like the Roland, a domestic 4x4 armed with 3 dusty wire guided ATGMs and smoke grenades. Way more wacky is the Steyerpuch Haflinger 4x4, armed with different ATGMs in various fucked up configurations. This Christmas attraction looking version is armed with 5 guided missiles. A somewhat more conventional layout is this one, armed with 10 RB-53 Bantam ATGMs in a rotating contraption. Don't worry though, it gets worse. With this, I am very unsure what the idea behind this was. Again, wanting to be a theme park attraction it seems, with a total of 14 Bantam ATGMs now, which, according to Reddit, are some of the worst ever made. Lastly, there are a couple of MLRS vehicles, just 2 rocket systems but on a couple of different chassis. And it is with the greatest of displeasures that I announce that they are both very cancer. The first system is the RWK-007 system, with 30 81mm rockets that can be 300mm of armor each. This system was put on the Tornado Mark I and Schützenpanzer 63, and the Piranha 2 8x8 was armed with the RWK-014, which is basically the same thing. The other system is the MRS-80, the same one the USH and Rakettenautomaat have. This system was put on the Tornado and Puma, as well as on the MR-820. An entirely new vehicle, truly phenomenal. Ending on SPAA, starting with one of my most favoritely named vehicles, the M6 Flabeschutz. The Flabeschutz. It's a simple 6x6 off-road truck armed with a 20mm flak gun. This is the guy that was responsible for nailing those couple German aircraft. They threw the 20mm on some other trucks, like the Steyr Pinzgauer. What the fuck? With an Oerlikon Gateway and an Opel Blitz. The Unimac U-25 was armed with a couple 20mm. The first one on a raised platform, allowing it to actually fire forwards, which is pretty crazy for these types of vehicles, though the thing can only go about 53 km/h. A later version was armed with the Flak 54 gun, a slightly better gun overall, but still with the same meh speed. Both of these were just prototypes. What, you really thought Switzerland would start accepting things all of a sudden? A modified HS-30 body was used for a couple SPAs, called the Flakpanzer A14. The first version had 2 20mm and a later version 2 30mm in a lower profile turret, to make it harder to spot from the air. The Panzer 51 was transitioned into SPAA a couple times, firstly with a very odd caliber, 2 34mm guns, which are apparently a sort of mid-range counterpart to the Bofors 40mm. The Panzer 51 Zwillingsflakpanzer gets a new turret with more conventional 30mm, as well as smoke grenades, which could come in handy. The Panzer 51 Vierlingsflakpanzer again gets a new turret, now armed with 4 20mm. Some real Stoeres type shit. But it also gets a radar now as well. The GDF CO2 is a prototype built on an M113 chassis, equipped with an entirely new one-man turret that gets pretty much everything. It is armed with two 35mm that get APDS T-shells, a laser rangefinder, thermals, target tracking, and it can rotate at 145 fucking degrees per second. This thing can make a full 360 degree rotation in about 2.5 seconds. For reference, the fastest rotating turret currently in the game, that I could find, is on the Italian Sidam 25. Which is over twice as slow. I'm not sure how the gunner would survive operating this thing, but as proven by the recent addition of the Ajax, crew health is not an implemented mechanic anyway. This thing was a prototype for the bit more well-known, and ELT39's favorite vehicle, the GDF DO3 Escorter. It gets the same exact particle accelerator turret, but now also with a search radar. The body is entirely new and made specifically for this thing. It can go up to 120 km per hour and has a moving cabin for either high ground clearance or good aiming range. The Fliegerabwehrpanzer 68 were, very simply, two prototypes of the Panzerkanone 68 hull equipped with Gepard turrets. One was converted back into a Panzerkanone, the other one still exists today. Nothing crazy, but would have been a great addition if Switzerland wasn't just a subtree. This is where we get back to the Shark series. The Shark was armed with the previously mentioned Sidam 25 system, the French R440 Crotel system, having 11 to 15 km range, and even the ADAT system, though without the 25mm. For whatever unknown reason, Oerlikon also placed the ADAT system on an A113 for the export market, despite not producing the ADAT system nor the M113. The last outsider turret for the Shark is the Wildcat turret, equipped with double 30mm capable of firing AP-FSDS shells and a head round. It gets night vision, target tracking, and solid radars. The Shark did also receive an entirely new turret, named the Bofors Trinity. It gets a Bofors 40mm capable of firing APDS and HEVT, made much easier with a laser rangefinder, search radar, and target tracking. With the Shark out of the way, we have more Piranhas to go through. There was a Piranha 2 6x6 and 8x8, both armed with the British Blazer air defense system, similar to the Stormer AD in-game, though with different weapon layouts. The 6x6 variant has the same 25mm Gatling gun as the Stormer, but 4 blowpipe missiles instead, whereas the 8x8 gets a 20mm Vulcan, but retains the same stingers as in-game. The Piranha 2 was armed with the French TA-20 turret, a derivative of the one the Santel uses in-game, just with 20mm Oerlikons instead of the missiles, but it retains the search radar and smokes. The last Piranha 2 with a proper turret was armed with the Norwegian RS6 RCWS, armed with a 30mm and Pioren manpads. There's one more Piranha 2 though, pulling along the British Rapier Field Standard C system. Very similar to the Rapier in-game of course, and I do believe that it is part of the vehicle, as in the vehicle is needed to operate the missiles. The Piranha 3 was armed with the German Skyranger 35 system, a pretty well-known Vizsórad system at this point, capable of firing head rounds at up to 1000 rounds per minute, being able to shred pretty much anything. The Piranha 3 10x10 was equipped with the Crotel NG system, same exact one the ITO-90M uses, and the Piranha 5 was also equipped with the Skyranger 35. Last but not least, though not particularly exciting either, Switzerland uses the Iris-T SLM system, same as in-game, with 5 currently in use. Although most of these vehicles don't pique my interest in particular, there are some absolute gems here. From the early domestic medium tanks and tank destroyers, to wacky SPAAs, to the 140mm Leopards. There's some real fun stuff here. When or if we'll ever see most of these remains a question, considering it took well over half a year for us to get the Thai ground tree after the air tree, and for the Benelux tree we're still fucking waiting. I have to apologize for taking so long this video. Hopefully next part, Yugoslavia, will come out in a better time frame. I do have some personal stuff though, but in the meantime, subscribe.